Welcome to class, everyone. Go ahead and settle in. So, for today's explainer, we're diving into the absolute, wild, multi-layered history of America's most infamous piece of real estate. I am super thrilled to be your guide today as we navigate the incredibly dynamic and, honestly, sometimes pretty dark story of Alcatraz Island. Let's kick things off with a quick bell ringer. What's the very first thing that pops into your head when you hear the word Alcatraz? I mean, for a lot of us, Hollywood has already painted a really specific picture, right? We think of this storm-battered, absolutely inescapable prison packed with 1930s gangsters. And well, while that is definitely a big part of the story, the true historical reality is vastly more complex. It stretches way beyond just the walls of a federal penitentiary. So here's our lesson plan for today's explainer. First, welcome to the Rock. Second, pelicans and military fortresses. Third, the maximum security era. Fourth, the Native American occupation. And finally, number 5, Alcatraz today. All right, let's get right into part 1. Welcome to the Rock, navigating the history of America's most infamous island. You see, Alcatraz didn't just magically pop into existence as a prison. Its story literally spans centuries. We're looking at its discovery in 1775, its time as a military fortress in the 1850s, that famous pivot to a federal prison in 1934, a massive cultural shift with the Native American occupation in 1969, all the way to the national park it is today. So keep this roadmap in the back of your mind as we travel through time today. Which brings us to Part 2, Pelicans and Military Fortresses. We're looking at Alcatraz before it was that infamous federal prison. Let's rewind the clock all the way back to 1775. A Spanish explorer named Juan Manuel de Ayala was mapping out San Francisco Bay, and he actually named this tiny rocky outpost La Isla de los Alcatraces. That literally translates to Island of the Pelicans. Quite the contrast, isn't it? I mean, long before there were concrete cell blocks and notorious mobsters, this place was just a loud, kind of smelly, totally isolated haven for seabirds. But, a quiet bird sanctuary just wasn't going to last forever in that location. By the 1850s, the United States military looked at this island and realized it was an absolutely crucial strategic site, so they heavily fortified it. We're talking cannons and troops stationed there specifically to protect San Francisco Bay from any potential naval threats. The military didn't just stop at building a fort, though. Eventually, the island took on a secondary role, functioning as a military prison. And this is a really crucial turning point for your notes class. Way before the infamous mobsters arrived on the scene, the island actually got its very first taste of incarceration by transitioning into a spot to hold rogue soldiers who had broken military law. Okay, moving right along to Part 3, the maximum security era. Welcome to the federal penitentiary spanning from 1934 to 1963. So, in 1934, Alcatraz was officially converted into a federal prison. But listen, this was not just any prison. This was the ultimate maximum security environment. We're talking incredibly strict rules, notoriously harsh conditions, and just unprecedented levels of security. The government basically wanted a facility that would send a chilling message to criminals across the entire country. And Alcatraz? Well, Alcatraz was their absolute answer. It was this brutally strict environment that earned the island its famous nickname, the Rock. Its isolated location, smack in the middle of San Francisco Bay, essentially weaponized the geography. The freezing 50-degree waters and those violent currents, they basically acted as the ultimate set of prison walls. It made escaping extremely difficult, if not flat out impossible.
And because of this intense, next-level security, the federal government sent the absolute worst of the worst here. We're talking about massive, headline-grabbing names. Guys like George Kelly, Robert Stroud, and, of course, mob boss Al Capone, who, fun fact, actually ended up playing the banjo in the prison's inmate band while he was there. Alcatraz was explicitly designed to break the most disruptive inmates in the entire federal system. Now, with those kinds of inmates locked up together, you can imagine the sheer desperation to get out. Lots of prisoners attempted to escape, but officially, 0 escapes were ever confirmed as successful. 0. It remains one of America's greatest historical mysteries to this day. I mean, did anyone actually survive those treacherous, freezing waters to make it to shore? Well, officially speaking, the record stands at 0.
So that begs the question, if the prison was so incredibly secure and inescapable, why did it ever close? Well, the answer is a fascinating lesson in economics over dramatics. On one hand, you had the ultimate prison, right? Highly isolated, highly secure. But on the other hand, that exact same isolation created a complete logistical nightmare. Literally every single drop of fresh water, every piece of food, and all daily supplies had to be physically transported to the island by boat.
And that brings us to a really important year for your timelines, 1963. The staggering operating costs, all driven by that logistical nightmare of shipping everything in, well, they finally caught up with the facility. In 1963, the federal penitentiary was forced to permanently close its doors. The most secure prison in America wasn't defeated by some genius inmate breakout. Nope, it was defeated by a massive shipping bill.
All right, let's pivot to part 4, the Native American occupation, reclaiming the island from 1969 to 1971. So, after the prison sat there completely abandoned, it actually became the stage for a totally different kind of history, a critical civil rights movement. Native American activists occupied Alcatraz from 1969 to 1971. Their goal was incredibly powerful. They wanted to raise national and global awareness for indigenous rights and issues. And this occupation, it fundamentally shifted the legacy of the island. It temporarily took this symbol of absolute confinement and turned it into a highly visible platform for activism.
Which brings us to our final section, Part 5, Alcatraz Today, from federal prison to national park.
Today, Alcatraz is proudly managed by the National Park Service, and far from being a place people are absolutely terrified to go, it's actually one of San Francisco's most popular global tourist attractions. You can actually take a ferry over there right now, explore the old prison cells, learn firsthand about those famous inmates we just discussed, and safely enjoy the stunning views of the city, the very same views that once taunted the prisoners locked up there. To wrap up today's lesson, I really want to leave you with a question to chew on. From a quiet island of pelicans, to a military fortress, to a prison of total isolation, and finally to a powerful platform for civil rights, what is the true legacy of the Rock? It's a fantastic reminder for all of us that history is rarely just one thing, and even the smallest piece of land can hold so many different lifetimes. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer class. Keep asking great questions, and I will see you next time.